This episode of Bullet Heaven was made possible by mages. In episode 83 and episode 170 of Bullet Heaven, we took a look at Bullet Soul, Tama Tamashii for the Xbox 360 and Steam respectively. Both offered excellent gameplay and a decent amount of content, with the Steam release being the best bang for the shooting game fans' buck. But it's not over yet. Mages is back with 5PB's second release in the Bullet Soul arena, Bullet Soul Infinite Burst.
Bullet Soul Infinite Burst was originally released to the Xbox 360... Wait, seriously? All the way back in May of 2014? Time sure has flown by, hasn't it? On the Xbox 360, Bullet Soul Infinite Burst was released in both a Standard Edition and a Limited Collector's Big Box Edition, which included a special issue of Famitsu, a download code for the first Bullet Soul release, and an arranged soundtrack CD. A North American release also happened on Xbox 360 Games on Demand in November of 2016.
Infinite Burst actually includes the original game already, which made that download code a little on the redundant side, even though this version has some slight tweaks like new enemies and rebalanced multipliers. Normal mode is more or less the same thing we've taken a look at twice already. With that said, if you haven't already seen those previous reviews, you should definitely go take a look at episode 170 now. Go ahead, we'll wait.
Back again? Cool. We're going to be taking a look at Infinite Burst's new features and modes of play in this episode to see if it's worth the extra scoop on Steam. Let's take a closer look.
The main meat and potatoes of Bullet Soul Infinite Burst is the Burst mode, which enhances and remixes the Bullet Soul mechanics players know and love into a mode that purely focuses on getting as many points as possible in the shortest amount of time. As such, the scoring mechanics are actually the main focus outside of the actual controls and flow of the game, and we'll take a look at that soon.
Like the Steam release of Bullet Soul Tama Tamashii, Infinite Burst gives players the choice between the full 4-ship roster, including Loop, who was originally a DLC character in the Tama Tamashii version B mode on Xbox 360. Infinite Burst is therefore 100% identical to its Xbox 360 counterpart.
Controlling each character's ship is pretty much exactly the same as Bullet Soul Tama Tamashii. Players have 8-way control of their character and inputs for shots mapped to X and A by default, as well as the burst attack, which is mapped to the B button. However, unlike the basic mode of play from Tama Tamashii, there are no power-ups or bomber pickups in the game, and players are 100% powered up. This lets players focus on other more important mechanics instead.
Players also don't have a traditional life stock. Instead, players have a green life gauge that will deplete when the player is hit and can be refilled by new special R pickups, which are square and bright green, making them hard to miss. These pickups only recover a small amount of life though, so getting to know each stage is probably a good idea. Some stages have more than others though, making for a more robust recover if it's needed. For a much higher amount of recovery, reaching the game's extend score can boost the player's life considerably.
Just as in the original Bullet Soul, defeating enemies will wipe their bullets from the screen, allowing for better movement around the playfield to take out more foes. Obviously, taking out larger enemies as quickly as possible takes priority, as they will often produce much more fire than your standard popcorn fare. In Infinite Burst, rather than turning into ghostly versions of their former selves to seemingly fake-out players, enemy bullets will instead just sort of vaporize on the spot, leaving the screen clear of distractions.
As players defeat enemies in close proximity, the burst gauge will build up on the player's side of the screen, indicated in blue. When full, the gauge will turn red and shine along with the player's craft. At this point, the player's burst attack can be activated. When burst is activated, the player's ship will transform and receive dramatically higher speeds and firepower. Not surprisingly, this allows for some fairly epic destruction.
The burst mechanic is taken even further with a defensive bomber at the player's disposal when the burst is activated. There's a lot of chaos at any given time on screen, and players with fast enough reflexes can avoid an untimely collision by pressing the burst button again to deploy the screen-clearing bomber. This will immediately end burst when used though. If a player is hit well in burst, it will also end immediately, but they will also take damage. Another critical point to effectively build the burst even faster. The further up the screen the player is, the faster it will recharge.
Any one cleared stage can be taken on in practice mode, which lets players really come to grips with enemy waves and stage progression one stage at a time for that perfect playthrough. But players also have access to the Poncho modes for each of the two main gameplay modes. The Poncho, or Badass mode, is basically a single stage score attack for players to fine-tune their skills while competing on worldwide leaderboards.
As with Tama Tamashii, Bullet Soul Infinite Burst is an excellent game for new players to get into bullet hell style games. But, more than it is a Danmaku style title, Bullet Soul Infinite Burst plays even more like a Caravan style shooter, complete with hidden referential score points and mechanics for high score chasers to really dig into. There's even a pure timed Caravan mode available as well, which is more or less identical to the Caravan DLC mode in Tama Tamashii, another mode included with the Tama Tamashii Steam release. All in all, it's a lot of fun to play.
But there's a bit of a dilemma here too. Bullet Soul Infinite Burst is only really about 40% more game in addition to Tama Tamashii. Given that both Steam releases have the same core game, albeit with loop included in Infinite Burst, as well as one extra mode, Poncho Modes and Caravan Mode for the same price, Infinite Burst may not be as good a value if players already have Tama Tamashii.
However, Burst Mode is extremely fun to play, to the point that we felt that Bullet Soul and the limited edition of Infinite Burst on Xbox 360 were worth their asking price at roughly 6 to 8 times the Steam version's cost. A total of $30 for both releases is a pretty awesome deal, comparatively speaking. And with local co-op and such competitive scoring elements, there's all kinds of replay here too. Bullet Soul Infinite Burst takes a two-pronged approach to scoring high outside of bonuses. Enemy kills with close proximity and coin collection are the main two scoring hooks here, and the risk-reward for both are pretty intense no matter the character chosen. However, we felt that loop was best suited for scoring in general.
Enemy destruction value will steadily climb as more are defeated as closely as possible without collision. These kills will chain to higher and higher values according to how many are killed in rapid succession. Knowing where enemies appear will definitely help in maintaining the highest scores per enemy kill. With Burst engaged, players can get these scores up much higher in a much shorter time as well.
All enemies drop coins when defeated, which can be collected for even more points. The more that are collected, the more they will be worth per pickup. These values can exceed 100,000 points each, indicated over the burst and life gauges. In burst mode, coins are transformed into Poncho coins and make the value climb even more. Poncho coins also help maintain and increase burst power to keep the player's burst going even longer. All coins that are on screen are automatically collected and scored for when burst is activated as well.
Just like in Tama Tamashii, there are also all kinds of score points that can be discovered through various conditions. Secret scores for hitting various points in the stage, destruction bonuses for destroying specific emplacements or stage elements, mystery bonuses akin to those in Star Soldier, and many more exist in every stage to boost the player's pointage. In Burst Mode, these point values are worth significantly more than those in the basic Bullet Soul game mode.
A new bonus has also been added in Burst Mode in the form of a collection bonus, whereby collecting a certain amount of coins awards the player with extra points. A new pseudo-enemy is also present. A treasure chest will sometimes appear that spews coins or Poncho coins when shot, depending on whether Burst is active or not. This can lead to massive point boosts, and several can appear at a single stage. At stage end, as always, players get to see all of the bonuses that contributed to their current score, with round-end bonuses for boss time remain, shields, and, depending on performance, medals with attached star ratings. Extra massive bonuses are also awarded for stars from stage-end performance medals at the end of the game.
With regards to Caravan Mode, getting a multiplier as high as possible before time up can be pretty tricky. However, taking out enemies as far up the screen as possible and as closely as possible can get players into the hundreds with regards to the multiplier, which can really rack up the points when competing on the leaderboards.
Dying as little as possible in Caravan Mode will also yield special end-round bonuses that can boost a player's pointage even further. With online leaderboards for every mode, every ship, and even every stage, there are tons of ways for players to test their skill against the world, and with these kinds of score mechanics and great gameplay to boot, Bullet Soul Infinite Burst will surely have shooting game fans coming back for more. Have you ever had a sense of deja vu? If you haven't, but you have gotten Bullet Soul Tama Tamashii, Infinite Burst's normal game is kinda like that, though there are some tweaks to the stages that make them ever so slightly different. It's also much easier to obtain special bonuses on the normal game mode, which is decent.
All of the characters have new portraits that, in the end, look much better than the original games. There are, once again, some art pieces that are quite a bit on the risque side, but the 2D art is as good as ever. The same goes for the in-game 2D sprites and new UI elements.
Infinite Burst's 3D stuff is almost entirely identical though. With the exception of the slightly different player ship fire and a handful of new enemies, the visuals here are identical to Tama Tamashii, straight down to its fixed 720p resolution.
The sounds in Infinite Burst are also more or less identical to Tama Tamashii, which means the same sounds and explosions are present. They can go on for a little too long, especially in the case of enemy explosions, but nothing beats those bonus jingles. Each character has new VO lines in Infinite Burst, but the clips for collecting Poncho coins can get a little under our skin, especially in the case of Loop.
On the other hand, the revamped arranged soundtrack by Jake Kaufman sounds pretty good, although it's not quite as good as Resonator's original tracks. But it's enough to give Infinite Burst's Burst Mode a little more identity from the original release. Overall, good stuff.
There is one questionable bit to Bullet Soul's presentation, though. The pre-rendered endings have some VO, but no subtitles for those that might not understand the Japanese language. It's not a lot in the grand scheme of things, but it does stand out when everything else has some kind of text to translate what's written in the game.
Rounding out the presentation is a set of achievements, Steam trading cards, and a great UI that takes the presentation of Tama Tamashii and changes the background to differentiate it slightly from Bullet Soul's first release. All kinds of options also exist, including a Tate mode and various controller and sound options.
So, how does Bullet Soul Infinite Burst stack up? Let's take a look.
Bullet Soul Infinite Burst's controls are pretty much spot on. It's supremely satisfying squeezing through a huge beam of bullets.
In any mode, Infinite Burst controls superbly. Perfect for newbies.
Infinite Burst has the kind of challenge that works extremely well for newcomers.
Veterans may not find especially much in the line of difficulty here, but scoring high can be a challenging thing to do, especially in what is essentially a 1LC.
With 2 full modes, extra Poncho stages, a Caravan Mode, and 4 different ships with score chasing for each, there's a ton to play here.
2-player co-op adds even more replay to the mix.
The visuals in Bullet Soul Infinite Burst are lower resolution than we'd like, but they work really well, especially for a game with a 3D engine.
Infinite Burst's new portraits are also really well produced, though some art pieces are a little on the questionable side.
Resonator's soundtrack worked well in the beginning for the original Bullet Soul, but Infinite Burst's arranged tracks by Jake Kaufman don't quite match the originals.
Some voice samples, especially from Loop, are firmly on the irritating side of things.
The changes to the scoring and gameplay in Bullet Soul Infinite Burst's Burst Mode are excellent. A great example of ingenuity done right.
But with so many modes from the original game, even though they're slightly tweaked, it really only feels like an add-on rather than a full title.
At just $15, the slightly rebalanced Normal Mode and Burst Mode probably make Infinite Burst worth its price once again. At least, it was for us. You know, when we bought them new at retail for $100+ a pop.
The Burst Mode is definitely one that makes this game worth it, though we're certain some will disagree.
If you've already got Bullet Soul on Steam, Infinite Burst may feel like just an add-on, but at just $15, Bullet Soul Infinite Burst is a game that should still be heavily considered. The Burst Mode is a great alternate version of Bullet Soul, and the Normal Mode does have tweaks that make it different from Tama Tamashii. Overall, a solid value. Bullet Soul Infinite Burst gets a 4.5 out of 5. You can get a copy of Bullet Soul Infinite Burst on Steam today for about $15. This was actually a game you liked for once, huh?
It's really a great game. For players like me that aren't especially skilled in bullet hell, it's an excellent place to start.
I agree. Between the novice modes in cave games and Bullet Soul's various modes, there's all kinds of great places to start.
More shooting games need to be like this one. Why can't they all be?
Here are some other games, including Bullet Soul Tama Tamashii, that are great starting places for shmup players everywhere.